Western Spring Television. Ours it is.
Well, happy Monday and happy celebrations to all our Christian brothers and sisters celebrating the Easter week, all of the Easter festivities that have happened in the course of last week and, of course, over the weekend. My name is Emmanuel Ojadigele, and I welcome you to a brand new week, a brand new episode of Morning Spring on Western Spring Television, where we bring it to you as it is. We're reaching you live from StarTimes Channel 190 on the DTT platform, but you can follow the conversation on all our social media handles on Facebook and Instagram and on Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also search for us on YouTube at Western Spring Television and subscribe to our channel there so you can follow us live and also catch up with all other conversations and other episodes of your favorite programs that you've missed. Well, it's the Monday after Easter Sunday. A lot of people took the time out to pray for the country. Interesting scenes coming out from Ondo State. A lot of things happening around the country. But then welcome to the show. We'll look at what we have for you this morning.
Yes, it's the Monday after Easter, and I hope that the joys that comes with Easter will be yours and that of your families. I am Timmy Tekme Ajijalal, and thanks for joining us on the Morning Spring Western Spring Television this morning.
Well, you already know what we do for you on the program. We bring to you newspaper analysis, show you what's on the faces of the national dailies. We also tell you what's happening in the socio-political, socio-cultural, and socio-economic group spheres, where we bring our analysts to help make sense and make light of some of the issues that have been dominating the polity in the last few days. And of course, on the Spring Trends, you get to see who's trending, what is trending, why they're trending, and what people are saying about the who, the what, and the why. Well, let's not take too much of your time. Let's go straight to the papers, but we'll do that after this break. To stay with us. Welcome back to the show. It's still Morning Spring on Western Spring Television. Begin with the Punch newspaper this morning. The Punch newspaper is where we kickstart our review this morning. And the banner headline for Monday, April 10th, 2023 says, fuel subsidy removal. Marketers seek CBN loans for 30,000 gas stations. That's on page 21. 30,000 gas stations. Marketers seek CBN loans for 30,000 gas stations. And riders say gas stations to cushion subsidy removal effect, as PMS may sell for 750 naira per litre. That's premium motor spirit, otherwise known as petrol, may sell for 750 naira. NATO wants end to subsidy. NLC to meet incoming government over removal date. Interesting riders for that story there. So much about fuel subsidy has made public discourse in the past few days. It's been an ongoing conversation really for years, but it has been ramped up by the pronouncement of several of the candidates during the electoral season, the campaigns and all of that, and also by the president-elect. He has also made some very strong comments, and Nigerians are waiting. The NLC will be meeting the incoming government to reach an agreement on the removal date.
Yes, and I think Nigerians should start warming up and start preparing for the inevitable right now, because its realizations are dawning, and fast dawning as well, that subsidy removal is the way to go, might be the way to go, especially with the incoming government. And 750 naira per litre is no joke. And so all hands needs to be on deck. And well, like the federal government has said, there's money set aside, I think, for the palliatives, according to them, to cushion the effect of subsidy removal. But I think the people should start warming up, really, for the inevitable.
Away from the subsidy story now, beneath that story, interesting and heartwarming story coming out from Ondo State. A bishop demands justice for 41 or attack victims as church reopens. what better time to reopen the church than on Easter Sunday?
Yes.
Many 10 months actually after those worshippers were massacred on that fateful Sunday. And for some persons, I saw pictures of some of the victims who were on wheelchairs attending the service, and also some other people there. You can see them congregating to lift their voices to God. Really encouraging scenes there. Shows you that even in the face of adversity, people still have resilience. They're still willing to come back to worship. And the church looks like it has been renovated too.
Yes. Well, it looked like he was prepared, mentally and even physically for the reopening. And it's quite good that the church was closed and, for a while, so people could get their acts together and get back to church with more mind and unity. And like you said, what better time, if not on Easter Sunday?
All right, below that, at the bottom strip of the paper, federal state lawmakers to get 49 billion naira. That's on page 2. Federal and state lawmakers to get 49 billion naira on page 2 of the Punch newspaper. At the time when there's no cash, when people don't have money, when there are clamors for the reduction in cost of governance, we're still seeing lawmakers to get 49 billion naira. But it's I don't know how to put it, but it's Nigeria, and the cost of governance most times outweighs allocations to critical sectors of the economy. But Nigerians need to start making conversations on these issues themselves. They are the ones who get affected, about it.
Very true. I don't think Nigerians are touchlighting areas that they need to, especially governance. And if we're having a lot of cuts on every other sector, I think governance should be one of those. In fact, the very topmost on the list.
Well, moving on from that to Zamfara State, bandits slash ransom for 85 Zamfara abductees. And there's a picture of Governor Bello Matawale there. Bandits slash ransom for 85 Zamfara abductees. And it seems like after the election, banditry picked up again. Several killings coming out from different parts of the country. In Benue State, about 400 persons have been killed in weeks, not up to 5 weeks. 136 persons over 5 days just last week. And now the former deputy governor of Nasarawa State was also abducted over the weekend, and his kidnappers demanding 70 million naira ransom. And here we are now, bandits slashing the ransom, almost like you're buying goods or commodity at the market. You make an initial offer, and then the seller decides to say, okay, let me give you a discount and bring it down to this price. But we're talking about people here, 85 people, and now their lives are being, bandied across the table for prices. I mean, it's just disheartening that we're still at this position.
Very.
Well, federal government bars online banks from accessing customers' photos, contact. Very important story, very important action there by the federal government. But I still want to see the technical part of it. I read somewhere that there's now an update on all of these apps on Google, and the owners of the apps have a deadline to meet to update their apps. So your online bank apps now may not be able to access your contact list photos. That's how they've been able to reach out to other people and harass them over the debts owed by their customers, because the apps have access. It's part of the permissions that you grant to the apps before you can use it. Have access to your contact, your SMS, and even your photos. So the federal government barring that is a welcome development. I'm sure many of the borrowers will be, people borrow money for different reasons. But this is really good, protecting them and their personal information.
Yes, very good. I quite agree with that.
Well, on page 8 of the Punch newspaper, assets declaration defaulters may be removed from office. Asset declaration defaulters may be removed from office, is according to the CCB there. I want to see really if that threat or if the law will be followed to the letter. We usually have issues, a lot of issues enforcing laws and rules. But it's good that the CCB is coming out to say that this is the punitive measure for anyone who defaults in declaring their assets. And on page 28, can governors others preach love at Easter? That was a recurring message all through the weekend. Love, peace, and unity. Interestingly, apart from the religious body, the same politicians who employ religious and tribal sentiment are turning around to make hypocritical statements. I see them as hypocritical statements, asking for love and peace when they've passively and actively encouraged division. We pray that the country goes through the process of healing and that we emerge strong and even stronger from all of this crisis. Another story on the Punch newspaper is Buhari Osinbajo, NBA Mon ex-ICJ judge Bola Ajibola, who died over the weekend. We pray a lot of commendations and commiserations coming in for him there. We hope that his soul finds rest with God. That's all on the Punch newspaper this morning.
Right, moving on quickly to the Nation newspaper. The banner headline says, governors under pressure over security vote spending. Governors under pressure over security vote spending and the riders. Federal agencies, NFIU, EFCC seek movement of account to CBN for proper monitoring. Federal agencies, NFIU, EFCC seek movement of account to CBN for proper monitoring. And then just below that story, election petitions, Coker urges judiciary to do justice. Clerics ask incoming government to keep Nigerians alive. Cleric asks incoming government to keep Nigerians alive. And then just below that story, the banks, all firms, others flout stock exchange governor's rules. Banks, all firms, others flout stock exchange governor's rules. And to the bottom strip of the paper, gunmen kill ASP, injured others at Lagos checkpoint. Gunmen kill ASP, injured others at Lagos checkpoint. And that is on page 6 of the Nation newspaper. And 15 killed in road crash. That is on page 6. Over the weekend, 15 people killed in road crash. And gunmen have killed an ASP, and other people were injured as well. I hope that we can move past this very trying period of our lives. And just above the headline, Tinubu won because of his superb organization, says Sage. That's also on page 6. You want to know more on that story or on that statement, read page 6 of the Nation newspaper. And above the nameplate, Osinbajo, Obasanjo, others pay last respects at Ajibola's burial. And the writers say Buhari, Tinubu governors, Ishola, Mon, ex-ICJ judge. And that is on page 2 of the papers. And on page 4, APC asks tribunal to dismiss AA, APP, and APM petitions. Attack to Catholic Church reopens months after, which is quite heartwarming news at this period. But that's all the news story we have on the Nation newspaper.
Well, if away from that, on to the Daily Independent now. The Daily Independent newspaper. Monday, April 10th. Banner headline says, presidential elections petitions. Nigeria's future depends on your judgment. Kuka tells judges. That's on the Daily Independent this morning. Well, a lot of people have eyes on the judiciary ahead of proper sitting for all of the election petitions, particularly the presidential election. A lot of persons have been saying that Nigeria's future, really, and Nigeria's stability depends on this judgment, because many of the pronouncements will be cast in stone and used as judicial precedents for coming cases. And if any wrong pronouncements are made, if there are any misinterpretations of the provisions of the Constitution, it could form the basis of some other persons taking advantage of that to maneuver their ways in cases. So all of the judges must be up and doing according to Bishop Matthew Kuka now. They must do the right things. They must make the right pronouncements. They must interpret the Constitution, because there's some confusion right now over some provisions and sections of the Constitution. Some persons having back and forth arguments over what this really means, what that really means. Now it's left to the judges, Supreme Court justices, really, to interpret this for the common man.
Yeah.
That's a banner headline on the Daily Independent. Below that, RSA registration by PFA for Q4 rises by 69,889 subscriptions, as on page 29. It's still on that same page. Supreme Court asks INEC to recognize Njoku as APGA national chairman. Two factions within the APGA now, the All Progressives Grand Alliance, Njoku's faction and Victor Oye's faction, both at the courts now, and the Supreme Court has given a ruling recognizing Njoku as the national chairman of APGA. We're to see what that means for all the candidates, including Governor Charles Soludo of Anambra State, who won primaries under the leadership of Victor Oye. And let's see what this means for their ambitions and for their political careers. Below that, PBEX subnational intervention, taking ease of doing business reforms to all Nigerians, as on page 25. And JAMB fixes new date for 2023 UTME on page 6. Buhari, Tinubu, Sanwo-Olu, Abiodun on passage of jurist Bola Ajibola on page 7. And that's still on the face of the Daily Independent this morning. Fragile recovery, rising debt, weaken Nigeria's growth. That's Bamidele Ogunwusi's column there on the page 7 of the Daily Independent. And 15 people burnt beyond recognition in Enugu auto crash. Page 6 of the Daily Independent. We pray that they find rest with God. And we also need to look into this incessant road crashes. There was one in Osun State in the course of last week. Some of these things are because of carelessness or recklessness, but some of them really are because of the bad state of the road and a lot of other factors. We just hope that all of these things begin to cease and we get back to being people who enjoy their lives without all of these snags. Above the nameplate, Serap CGID sue Buhari NBC over 5 million naira fine against Channels TV. Serap is always in the news for their lawsuits against almost every other week. There is a lawsuit joining the president or the presidency or some agency or parastatal of the government, in the search for accountability and socioeconomic reforms. Well, Khan urges Nigerians to work towards brighter future for the nation. That's also on page 7 of the Daily Independent. That's part of business, part of wishes and admonitions coming out from Easter over the weekend. But that's all on the Daily Independent this morning.
Well, quickly on the Guardian newspaper, it doesn't have much stories, but the headline says UK revises foreign health workers recruitment, returns Nigeria to red list countries. And that's on page 3. And the writers say outrage over bill mandating 5-year pre-licensing practice for Nigeria-trained doctors. Bill poorly researched, reels out inaccurate figures. Federal government's brain drain committee reports not implemented. Group inactive for months. If bill becomes law, government officials should also stop medical tourism. And that's according to Tomori. Well, that's one interesting news. And I think that Nigerians are on the receiving end of this particular reform right now and review for the foreign health sector. But then this particular writer, the last one, saying if bill becomes law, government officials should also stop medical tourism. It should be something that we should really look into and really push forth. If Nigerians can have their way outside the country And I don't see why people that have been elected to serve them should have a field day, going out there anytime, anyhow, and whenever they want. Then the next story says, Kuka taxed Nigerians' next government on nation building. And says, for now, the most urgent mission is to start a psychological journey of making Nigerians feel whole again, of creating a large tent of opportunity and hope for us all. And that's on page 6. And I think that this message is coming at the most crucial time and using the right platform. That's the Easter celebration, to tell our next leaders give them this particular message. We need to build our nation, and we need to move past all of the hardships of the past few years and months. How Agbero multiple dues spiked transportation costs by 25% in Lagos, and that's on page 4. And this is quite alarming. 25% spike in transportation cost in a city is too much. It's too much for Nigerians. That's on page 4. And on page 6, Ajibola, a jurist for the ages. And I hope that his soul rests in peace and his family be consoled in this very trying period. And on page 5 rather as well, APC may zone Senate presidency to Southeast. Let's see how that pans out in the days to come. But that's all we have on the Guardian newspaper.
Well, it's been days after the second reading of that bill at the National Assembly, the floor of the House of Representatives, and reactions are still trailing it. A lot of persons still having comments on that bill, and the most recurring decimal actually is that if that bill does become law, then the same thing should be extended to political office holders and government officials. If you're banning doctors from leaving because you want them to, quote and unquote, give back to the society, you also should give back to the society with your money, instead of going to the UK or Saudi Arabia to, get medical care. Why don't you patronize or go to the primary healthcare centers or general hospitals around you? Well, that's all on the papers this morning. When we come back from this break, we'll bring you our guests to talk about some issues surrounding the election petitions that will soon begin at the presidential level. Stay with us.
Western Spring Television. Ours it is.
ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ nǹkan ló ń kojú àwọn ará àdúgbò àwọn ará àwùjọ tí ohun ò dẹ̀ dókè ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ ìnira ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ ìyà làwọn èèyàn ń kojú rẹ̀ ní àdúgbò ojú ọ̀nà tó kù díẹ̀ káàtó iná ọba tó mẹ́ẹ̀ tó ń ṣe ségesège àwọn tó ń wíwá àbàṣejẹ́ òbí tí ń sun lẹ́rùn àti àwọn nǹkan tí ò tí ì dé tí gbọ́ ìjọba ṣé wọ́n ní etí ọba nílé etí ọba lóko èèyàn náà ló ń jẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀ òun náà ló jẹ́ kí ìkànnì Western Spring Television pé ètò tí ó jẹ́ kẹ́yìn ara lé ẹ̀yin ará àwùjọ kẹ́lẹ́ mọ́ sọ bí tí bàtà bá ti ń tayé lẹ́sẹ̀ fún àwọn aláṣẹ ìjọba ohun tẹ́ ẹ ṣe ni wípé ẹ mú fóònù yín ẹ̀rọ ìbánisọ̀rọ̀ yín ẹ dàbù rẹ̀ ẹ mọ̀ yà ní gbọ́rọ̀ ẹ dàbù rẹ̀ ẹ ṣe
All right, good morning and welcome back to the show. If you're just joining us, it's Morning Spring on Western Spring Television. And if you've been with us, thank you for staying with us. This morning, we're looking at, we've taken the papers for you, but we're looking at the elections again. We're still in the election season. You know, the election doesn't end until it is decided by the courts. And we're joined this morning by a regular guest on the show, a United Kingdom-based lawyer and lecturer, Dr. Misbah Lateef. Thank you so much for joining us again on the show this morning.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you for having me.
So now we are getting close to inauguration. It's about a month from now, but the issues are still there concerning legal processes and the judiciary. But some persons like Chief Olisa Ogbakoba are saying that there's a need to dispense with the petitions before May 29th. Do you think that we should hasten up the process before May 29th or allow the entire period elapse?
Well, I think Mr. Olisa Ogbakoba, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, was speaking to the future because what he said cannot definitely apply at this time. I mean, we have a law that has set the timeline for determinations of these electoral cases. And I don't really see how the courts can hasten up, the processes at this time, or to rush the processes, because sometimes we say justice rushed is justice crushed. So even if the court is willing to do that, what about the parties? The parties may not really be inclined. For example, the respondent, the APC, the Tinubu, and all of them, they have been taking their time, under the law to file their processes. So basically, I think the idea of concluding electoral disputations in court before the swearing in of the president or governor or whoever is actually a very good idea. And then it is a journey that I think we should get through, perhaps after this cycle of election. But it's not something that we can actually do at this time. Legally speaking, it is not possible. And but I think it is a desirable goal that we can pursue. And we have an example, if you want me to draw that from another country in Africa, Kenya, and some other countries whereby their own constitution, all such disputes are to be resolved before the inauguration of the winner of an election. So it's something that we should aim at achieving, and I don't really see anything wrong with it, except that people clamoring for it now, I think they're just being, I would say, needlessly sensational. And some of these people who are saying this, they are people who actually took sides, in the last election. Of course, there's nothing wrong in that. I mean, it is a democracy after all, and people have the right, to take side. So, but I'm saying that most of these people who speak to those things, they actually speak to them from their partisan, or I would say, political interest. But then it's a good one. Hopefully, I mean, it has been a journey for Nigeria, if you ask me. I mean, between 2010 and now, we've had to tinker with our electoral act like 4 or 5 times. I mean, we had the 2010 electoral act, the 2011, 2015, and then 2022. So I think it's a journey. So hopefully we will get there.
Okay,
so that at least if we are able to resolve, such disputes, then it will enhance the legitimacy of whoever is going to be inaugurated. Because when we have dispute like this, whether we like it or not, it goes also to issue of legitimacy. So I think it's a very good one. Hopefully we should get there.
All right, so let's take a quick detour now, Dr. Lateef, before we come back to the issue at hand. Now, in the past few days or after the election, many legal practitioners in Nigeria have come up with conflicting interpretations of the Constitution, especially on the issue of the 25% in the FCT. It seems as if even the lawyers, the practitioners, some of them sons are not even sure of what the Constitution says. What's your perception of that? The fact that there is no, it's supposed to be cast in stone, but unfortunately, legal luminaries are having different views about the same subject. How does this impact on the judicial process?
Well, you see, in a legal contest, we are bound to have different sides, and this is why if you put 20 lawyers together to look at just one single issue, it is possible that you have 20 perspectives. And for me, this is part of the robustness that makes legal practice or legal profession what it is. It is not really a mystery. For me, I understand where this is coming from. So, and as I said earlier, some of these arguments that we have at this time, they do not necessarily proceed from, I would say, the platform of people sincerely having different perspectives. Some of them are actually motivated by partisan interest or sentiment. And I say this not to change the point I made earlier, where I said that lawyers ordinarily do disagree. This is why you have different sides. But even as we disagree, there are some points of law that are so clear that even common sense, you don't really have to be a lawyer to understand them. And this particular case in point, we have a section 299 of the Constitution of Nigeria. We have a case like the case of, I think, Oboru and Ibori or something. I can't remember. Don't let me just say that. But there's a case decided by the Supreme Court, and there are like 2 of them where the status of Abuja has been settled. For the purpose of counting or enumeration, Abuja is just like any other state in Nigeria. And if you ask me, this accords with common sense without going through the laborious, effort at technicality, trying to interpret the adjunct and, or all of those things. I'm saying commonsensically, what would ordinarily make Abuja a unique state such that even if a candidate had won in, say, all of the 36 states and then he failed to win in Abuja, then he will not become the president. I mean, that was not accord with common sense. So, and sometimes we say, even among ourselves as lawyers, it's also partly common sense. And this is why you don't really have to be a lawyer to understand something. So I belong to the side that says there is no controversy as to the status of Abuja, and that the point is you just count Abuja as the 37 states, and then a candidate who has met 2/3 of that, has met the requirement of the Constitution. But even at that, well, the matter is now before the judiciary. The Supreme Court had pronounced on this before, though not in an election petition case. It was in another case where the status of Abuja was an issue, and they said Abuja, going by that Section 299, it's like a state, like any other state in Nigeria. So it has the status of being the FCT. Fine, we know that. But so it is before the court now. I'm very certain, and I'm saying this with all sense of responsibility, that the court will most likely, agree with some of us who would say and insist that Abuja does not have any unique status, or the FCT doesn't have any unique status to confer on her, a veto status, such that even if you have won all of the states in Nigeria, like I said earlier, then if you don't win Abuja, then you have not won. I mean, that cannot be reasonable. That is ridiculous. That cannot be the intention of the Lord Maker who put that provisions in the Constitution, whether Section 299 or Section 134 and all of that. So basically for me, I think the controversies, as I said, well, people belong to different sides. I guess I also belong to a different side. So, but the court will pronounce on that, and hopefully we will come back to your studio, to this same issue again, and some of us will beat our chest and tell you that we said it, because I know that the court will most likely go the way that some of us have professed.
All right, let's talk about the agitations of people talking about pronouncing, having this court judgment, over with before the swearing in. Do you not think that the incoming administration now may have some sort of influence on the judgment eventually when they're sworn in and the case is still in court?
Yeah, well, the structure of governance is such that when we say we have three arms of government, you have the executive, legislature, and then the judiciary. When you have a sitting president whose case is being determined by the judiciary, which is another independent arm of government, yeah, it is possible for people to assume or to think that, well, a president is so powerful that he may actually exert influence on the judiciary. Yes, that perception is there, and we can't, of course, help that. But the reality again is that the experience that we have had in Nigeria since 1999 and now, except perhaps in 2015, when President Jonathan did not contest the outcome of that election. So the experience we've had over the past 26 years or thereabout, it has been that the determination as to who actually won has always been done, I would say, after the inauguration of the persons whose victory was disputed. This happened to Obasanjo, it happened to Yar'Adua and Jonathan, it happened to Buhari twice. So for me, this is not something strange, and that does not mean that the president who will be inaugurated on 29th May, would necessarily influence the judiciary to do something that does not accord with the law. But having said this, I quite agree with the proposition that going forward, we should amend our law in such a way to resolve cases like this before the winners are inaugurated. I tried to draw our attention to Kenya earlier. You see, one of the challenges we have in Nigeria is that we tend to make our processes cumbersome. In Kenya, for example, the Supreme Court of Kenya, under their constitution, is the court with the original jurisdiction to hear the petition as to whether someone has been duly elected as president or not. And we saw that in 2017, when that court overturned, the presidential election of that country, they did that within 14 days. And I'm saying that even the law in Kenya is that all election petitions, will be concluded within 14 days from the day of hearing. And then it takes only 30 days for the entire processes to run. When the winner was declared, the petitioner is required to file within 7 days. The respondent is required to respond, within 5 days. And, so the process is so seamless. But then you could say also that, well, Kenya is not as big as Nigeria. Kenya has a population of just about 51 million people, and then less territorial spread than Nigeria. So, but even I would say we can do that in Nigeria. Why do we have to go to the Court of Appeal, for example? The Supreme Court in Nigeria could also be the only court to determine this case. And then we could say within 2-3 months, so that we could have this done with before inauguration. And in that case, the perception that the president, might influence the judiciary will not be there. So it is part of the processes I think we should consider going forward. But definitely, it is too late for that in the day at this time.
All right, so let's look at some of the issues, some of the things that have been said by Agbakoba was that deciding the petition in 7 days would resolve some of the heat in the polity and all of that. A lot of persons have disagreed and saying that whether or not it's resolved in 7 days, the polity will remain heated the way it is. Let's look at the actions of some of the non-state actors now, some of the non-principal actors, the likes of Professor Soyinka and Father Kuka, who have come out to speak on this issue. Professor Itse Sagetu was in the news recently saying that this was the best election Nigeria has ever had, the 2023 elections. Now, all of these things, Wole Soyinka branding a particular group as a fascist on international stage, Father Kuka really digging into President Buhari. Do you think that all of these issues bode well for Nigeria?
Well, you see, in a democracy, we can't, restrict conversations for as long as they do not affect, I would say, the fundamental issues that, they do not really go to issue of our unity, or they do not, call to, I would say, insurrection against the state. They do not call to violence, So people, they have the liberty to express their views and all of this. So yes, so when people say some of the things that we've been hearing in the past days or weeks, there are those of them that have actually in a way contributed to eating up the polity. For example, those who have called, for insurrection in quote against the state, those who have been described as fascists, which is a claim that I also agree with. These tendencies,
Oh, you agree? You agree with Professor Soyinka, Dr. Lateef?
Yes, I agree with Professor Soyinka that I don't want to mention the group, but we both know the group. That a particular group, they have the tendency for fascism, and that is most unfortunate. This group, they have taken up virtually everyone who has disagreed with them. And it does not matter to them. So when people purport themselves to represent a new deal or a new agenda, and then they do not have the temperaments to condone opposition or divergent views, then that is even more dangerous than what they are condemning. And this is what we have seen with these tendencies to fascism and all of that. What they are doing goes beyond, having a stand or disagreeing with others. They're actually proclaiming that their stand is the only stand, and whoever dare to contradict them or to go against them, they declare them. So they've been attacking people online on social media. I have social media account, and I know the attack have also been subjected to, by this same group of people. So these are the part of, so in trying to see whether the polity is being heated up or not, we really have to sieve some of these conversations to see those that actually help us to advance or develop our processes. What Mr. Agbakoba said, for me, is positive and constructive. What Mr. Professor Soyinka has said is also helpful and constructive. So we can begin to separate, I would say, the grain from the chaff, so that we don't, load everything together. So, but really, for me, as I said earlier, democracy is a journey. Nigeria has been on this journey for over 2 decades now. we will continue to improve on our processes. And I agree with Professor Sage, I'm not sure you mentioned him earlier, who actually said that election, the 2020 election, was one of the best, or maybe the best in our history so far. I agree with that. I think most people who have attacked the 2023 election, they have attacked it from the standpoint of their own expectations. They thought their candidate would win or should win, which is fine. But then they also dangerously thought that the only thing that would make the election credible was for their candidate to win. So this is where I think they got it wrong. But 2023 was the first time we experienced with BVAS on a large scale, nationwide. So, and if you look at it, most people, again, they have focused on IREF as opposed to the BVAS. I've not seen any allegations so far where people said the BVAS was not used. And then you compare BVAS and IREF, you realize that the IREF component is very insignificant. It is an insignificant component of the process because it is merely about uploading results. So people need to be educated. So it would have been different now if people said the BVAS was not used at all, or that people use incident form that they used. So in 2023, what we saw was that people could not write result literally as they used to do. So for me, really, as I said earlier, the thing that we have seen so far, we have those of them that are very dangerous. They are not LD, they are not helping our democracy. And then we have other conversations on the other side that are actually very constructive, and we need them to develop or deepen our democratic our culture. So it's a case of finding a balance and trying to see how Nigeria will wriggle out of it. And I hope that whoever is inaugurated on May 29, and of course, I suppose that will be the president-elect that we know already, because it is highly unlikely that the courts will finalize the case before May 29. Highly unlikely. So, and if they do, well, in the unlikely event that they do that, well, whoever emerges, we really have to walk, this line to really work on the need to enhance our democratic culture, conversations, attend to national issues, in such a way that the unity of Nigeria and Nigerians, will not be at risk as we are currently witnessing.
All right, before we begin to wrap up, Dr. Lateef, there is a worrisome trend that people are calling attention to. The fact that we are washing our dirty linens in public and putting Nigeria on a bad spot on the international stage. A lot of persons have called attention to Chimamanda's letter to the United States. Just this morning, a very well-known account on Twitter, an international account, posted about the alleged drug case involving President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And people are saying that particular group you referenced earlier, in trying to reclaim, in quote now, their mandate, have succeeded only in putting Nigeria on the bad spotlight on the international stage. Do you agree with that assessment?
I agree with that, absolutely. As you can see, I speak with you from abroad, and with all sense of modesty, I've been to major cities in the world. I've lived consistently in the US for over a year when I was doing my postdoc. I've lived in Canada briefly. I've been to places, and I'm in the UK now. All of these places that I've been to, I can tell you that there is no place like home. I still prefer my Nigeria than even the UK where I am now. And I look forward to coming back to Nigeria someday soon, by the grace of God. Now, the point I'm trying to make about this is that I naturally detest people who throw stone at Nigeria from abroad. I mean, you are throwing stone at your own glass house. The UK system, as I speak to you now, they have a lot of challenges they are battling with. You won't see those things in the media. In the US, the 2020 election is still being disputed. You see President, former President, what is it called again Trump. Now? Trump, throwing a lot of... So the point is that is a democracy that is over 200 years old. That is a system where the ICT is top-notch, and yet they are still talking about challenges. So when people throw stone at Nigeria, regardless of their status, I naturally detest them. And I think it is a very bad thing to do. You see, we are not saying people should keep silent about challenges in their country, but there is a way you attend to challenges of your country without necessarily destroying the country in the process. All of the things that these people do, they are actually projecting Nigeria in bad light. And some of us who also live in abroad like them, it's a privilege. So we do our best in our own little corners to ensure that we project the positive image of the country. That is what is called patriotism. This is not to say you keep silent, as I said. We're not saying people should not talk about challenges in their country, but we're saying do not do it in a way. Okay, when people call on President Biden, for example, to come and intervene in Nigeria, I mean, I see them as slaves who are still in love with their chains. The question is that President Biden cannot do anything. So these people, they fool themselves around. Someone wrote yesterday on Twitter that President Biden said he will respond to the letter written by one of the people abroad, who are entrusted at home. And I said, look, this is laughable. President Biden cannot do anything. International law, international politics are dynamic. America is interested in dealing with Nigeria. Nations, they put their interests foremost and forward. What will a President Biden gain from an inconsequential letter written by a private Nigerian citizen, regardless of our international status? What would President Biden gain in siding with such an irresponsible letter? I'm sorry to say that, as opposed to dealing with Nigeria as a state. So for me, really, I think people would do that. They should rethink and reflect on the kind of negativity they are projecting, on their country. America is not perfect. UK is not perfect. Canada is not perfect. And like I said earlier, I love Nigeria, and I tell you, there is no place like home. Some of the challenges that we talk about in Nigeria, people have worse things here. They have corruption in this system. Where I live now, I saw corruption in America. I saw corruption in Canada. So what are we talking about? So we can deal with our challenges internally without destroying our country. That is my take.
Okay, so finally, as we let you go, there's been so much controversy surrounding this year's election. What would you say we got wrongly? What would you say? Bar the, like you said, the expectations of some persons not being met and that leading to the agitations. But on the conduct itself and all of the pre, during, and post-election process, what do you think we got wrong that should be worked on?
Okay, I think what we got wrong and which may continue to affect us is that the competitiveness of these offices or the attractions of these offices are just too high. Winning an election in Nigeria is like winning a lottery. So for as long as we retain this competitiveness and attractions, I'm afraid we will continue to experience these challenges. So for me, really, you can amend the Electoral Act 1,000,000 times. You can even amend the Constitution 1,000,000 times. For as long as these offices, they remain cash cow. For as long as these offices, they remain instant success for people, you become a common councillor in the local government and you become an instant millionaire. You become a governor. So for as long as we retain those vacuities and even the fraud in the system, I'm afraid, so this is for me really where the problem lies. It's not INEC. INEC cannot possibly police every electoral polling unit. The police in Nigeria, not anywhere in the world, do you have sufficient number of policemen to police everywhere. So, but when these offices are very, very attractive as they are, the stakes are very high. So the competition is what drives this crisis that we see. People are very desperate for power. They want to get to that office and become instant millionaire. They want to show off to their neighbor. So for me, really, those are the kind of things I hope the president-elect, when he gets there, will try to address. Let us make these offices less attractive so that people who are responsible, who have genuine interests of the masses, would be attracted to those offices because they are interested in serving the people, not because there is any money there. So we need to tone down the benefits, attached to these offices. Until we have done that, I don't really see whatever any amendment of the law can do to help us. I mean, that's my take, and that's how I see it, unfortunately. So we need to tone it down. The desperation is too much. It's too much. You don't have to. I mean, it's like you are winning lottery, like I said earlier. Why should it be so? Why should become a member of the House of Assembly in a state, for example, turn me to an instant millionaire? Because they have access to public funds, have access to a lot of. So these are the challenges I think we should address, and they are very fundamental.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Misbah Lateef, for once again joining us on the show this morning.
My pleasure. Good morning, and thank you.
Well, that's the first leg of the interview. Some interesting comments made by the doctor there, talking about why we need to reduce the lucrativeness of political offices. Maybe that explains the fights, the struggles, the antagonism, yes,
competitiveness.
yes, the antagonism in politics, where you see people struggling by all means to get into power. Oh, we'll take a break now. When we come back, we'll bring in our other guests to speak on some of the same issues and other issues. To stay with us.